Berlin, April 22, 1945. 50 feet underground in the Führerbunker, Soviet shells rained on the surface above. Adolf Hitler sat across from his remaining generals. The maps laid out before them showed a Germany that existed only on paper. His hands trembled, his face was gray. For 4 years, he had commanded the most powerful military machine ever built, conquered most of Europe, and fought the world to a standstill. Now, in his final days, he spoke of the one general who, in his eyes, had helped destroy it all. Patton. "Patton," Hitler said. "Patton is the one you could never stop." The room fell silent. Everyone in that bunker knew it was true. This is the story of Hitler's obsession with George Patton, and what the Führer finally admitted when there was nothing left to lose. To understand Hitler's final statement about Patton, you need to understand his first mistake about him. It was March 1943. Hitler received reports from North Africa. Rommel's Afrika Korps had just crushed American forces at Kasserine Pass. Thousands captured, tanks destroyed, Americans retreating in disorder. Hitler read the report and smiled. Americans are not warriors. They are merchants playing at war. This wasn't just propaganda. Hitler genuinely believed it. The Kasserine reports confirmed everything he thought. Then a new name appeared. Patton, taking command of the broken Second Corps. Hitler barely noticed. Another American general, probably a failure. 3 weeks later, those same broken units attacked at El Getter with fierce aggression. German positions that had held easily before were suddenly being overrun. Hitler read the report, frowning. One general shouldn't make this much difference. The assessment from his staff: Patton is aggressive, but ultimately doomed by his own recklessness. Hitler accepted this and put Patton out of his mind. July 1943, Sicily. The Allied invasion. Hitler's defensive plan focused on Montgomery, the main threat. The Americans were secondary. Then reports arrived. Patton's forces were racing across Sicily, through terrain Hitler's planners had said was impossible for armor. Hitler demanded an explanation. Patton wasn't following conventional doctrine. He was moving too fast for supply lines. He should have been running out of fuel, but he wasn't. Patton reached Messina first, beating Montgomery to the prize. Hitler called a conference. The intelligence report landed on his desk. 57 years old, cavalry officer, believes in reincarnation, wears ivory-handled pistols. Hitler dismissed Patton as a showman, theatrical, all performance, limited substance. But General Oberst Alfred Jodl said something that stuck. "Mein Führer, Patton does not think like a modern general. He thinks like a raider." Hitler paused. Raiders don't hold ground. They shatter cohesion. For the first time, Hitler began to wonder if this American cowboy might be more than just entertainment. Winter 1943. Hitler was obsessed with one question: where would the Allies invade France? Everything depended on getting this right. Spring 1944, the pattern became clear. George Patton commanded the 1st U.S. Army Group, stationed across from Pas-de-Calais. Hitler held a war conference. The Allies will not waste Patton on a diversion. He is their best offensive general. Where Patton is, the real attack comes. Hitler ordered the 15th Army, 15 divisions, the strongest defensive force in France, to remain at Calais. June 6, 1944. 6:30 a.m. Allied forces landed at Normandy, not Calais. Hitler's first question: where is Patton? Still in England, still at Calais. Hitler relaxed slightly. This Normandy operation was the diversion. The real invasion, Patton's invasion, was still coming. Weeks passed. Patton didn't move. Hitler kept the 15th Army at Calais, waiting, refusing to release those critical divisions to Normandy, where Rommel was screaming for reinforcements. July 1944. Intelligence confirmed the truth. The first U.S. Army group didn't exist. The tanks were inflatable. The radio traffic was fake. Patton commanded an army of ghosts. Hitler, according to witnesses, went silent. He didn't rage, didn't shout, just sat quietly staring at the map. The Allies had used Hitler's own intelligence against him, used his respect for Patton as a weapon. They knew Hitler would think logically, would assume the Allies wouldn't waste their best general on a deception. For the first time in the war, Hitler realized he'd been outthought. Goebbels later wrote that Hitler seemed personally offended by the Patton deception. But the humiliation was just beginning. August 1st, 1944. Patton activated the Third Army in Normandy. The ghost became real. Hitler's daily routine in August 1944 became grimly predictable. Morning briefing. Maps updated with overnight reports. And every morning, Patton had moved impossibly farther. August 3rd, the Third Army broke through at Avranches. Hitler ordered an immediate counterattack. Seal the breach. Contain Patton. August 7th, Hitler's counterattack at Mortain failed. Patton was already 50 miles past the breach. Hitler stared at the map. How is he moving this fast? His logistics officers explained, Patton is outrunning his supply lines. By doctrine, he should have stopped days ago. Hitler's response, but he hasn't stopped. August 15th, Patton's tanks were 150 miles from where they started. Field Marshal von Kluge reported, Mein Führer, we cannot establish a defensive line. Every position we prepare, Patton has already moved past. Hitler asked, where will he go next? Von Kluge admitted, we don't know. His movements follow no predictable pattern. This was Hitler's nightmare. The German military was built on predictable operations, calculate capabilities, predict objectives, deploy accordingly. Patton made prediction impossible. August 25th, Paris was liberated. Hitler barely reacted. He was focused on Patton approaching the German border. The Third Army had advanced over 400 miles in 3 weeks, and Hitler could not stop it. Hitler began asking about Patton at every briefing. Where is Patton now? What is Patton's fuel status? Where will Patton attack next? His staff noticed the fixation. But Hitler wasn't paranoid. He was beginning to understand something crucial. Patton wasn't winning through superior resources. He was winning through tempo. Moving faster than German decision cycles, attacking before defensive preparations could be completed, creating chaos faster than staff officers could process it. Hitler built the Blitzkrieg. He understood speed warfare. And that's why Patton terrified him. Because Patton was using Hitler's own philosophy against Germany, but doing it faster, more aggressively than even Hitler would dare. September 1944, Patton's advance stopped at the German border, not because Germany stopped him, but because he ran out of fuel. Hitler read this with relief. For 1 month, logistics accomplished what the Wehrmacht couldn't. Hitler made a decision. If Patton was Germany's greatest threat, remove him from the equation. December 1944, Hitler planned his final offensive. December 16, 1944, 5:30 a.m. Hitler's Ardennes offensive exploded through American lines. A massive surprise attack. Hundreds of tanks, elite SS divisions. The largest German offensive in the West since 1940. American positions collapsed. Entire divisions surrounded. Bastogne cut off. Hitler watched the reports with intense focus. This was his masterpiece. One final demonstration that Germany could still wage offensive warfare. that American lines could still break. But he was also watching for one specific detail. Where is Patton? The answer arrived quickly. Southern France, Third Army, pointed east toward Germany. Completely wrong direction. Hitler felt genuine relief. For the first time in months, he had launched a major operation where Patton wasn't the immediate threat. The Third Army was 100 miles away, facing the wrong direction. Even if the Americans reacted quickly, it would take weeks to pivot an entire army through winter terrain. Hitler had time. Time to exploit the breakthrough. Time to reach Antwerp. Time to change the war's trajectory. December 18th, 2 days into the offensive, reports arrived. Patton was moving Third Army north. Hitler wasn't worried. Even Patton couldn't turn an entire army in winter conditions. It was operationally impossible. December 19th, 3 days after the offensive began, Third Army attacked into the German southern flank. Hitler stared at the map in disbelief. Patton had turned 133,000 men, thousands of vehicles, and 3 full divisions, 90 degrees, through ice storms in 72 hours, and immediately attacked. Hitler asked his logistics staff, how? They had no answer. By every calculation, what Patton had just done should have been impossible. Hitler's offensive, his carefully planned, meticulously prepared masterpiece, was now taking fire from an army that shouldn't even be there. Within days, Patton's Third Army broke through to Bastogne. The German advance stalled. Hitler's last offensive failed, and Hitler finally understood. You cannot plan against Patton. You cannot predict him, cannot stop him with conventional defensive measures, because Patton doesn't operate conventionally. He operates on aggression and instinct, does things professional staff officers say are impossible, achieves results that shouldn't exist according to military science. According to multiple German officers who survived, Hitler spoke about Patton frequently in the final months, not in propaganda broadcasts, but in private conferences, strategic discussions. And the assessment was always the same. Patton was the only Allied general Hitler could never neutralize. April 22, 1945. Hitler's 56th birthday had just passed. The bunker shook from Soviet artillery. The Reich he built was collapsing. His remaining generals gathered for what would be one of the final strategy conferences. They discussed defensive positions that no longer existed, divisions that had been destroyed, a war that was already lost. Someone mentioned the Western Front, and Hitler spoke about Patton one last time. Multiple sources, including accounts from Generals Jodl, Keitel, and others who were present, report variations of this moment. Hitler said that of all the Allied generals, Patton was the most dangerous. Not because he was the smartest, not because he had the most resources, but because he was the only one who truly understood what Hitler himself had built the Wehrmacht to do: move faster than the enemy can react. Patton, Hitler allegedly said, fights the way we were supposed to fight. The room went quiet because everyone knew what he meant. The Blitzkrieg was supposed to make defensive warfare obsolete. Speed, aggression, striking before the enemy could prepare, creating chaos faster than command structures could process it. Germany did it to Poland, to France, to the early Soviet Union. Then Patton did it back to Germany. Hitler continued, saying that Patton proved Germany's own doctrine could be turned against it. That speed warfare has no nationality, only practitioners, and the Americans found one who practiced it better than Germany's generals. According to Jodl's post-war testimony, Hitler seemed almost admiring when discussing Patton. Not respectful. Hitler had no respect for his enemies, but an acknowledgement of capability. Patton had beaten Germany using Germany's own methods. In Hitler's final days, as the bunker shook and his empire burned, he kept asking about Allied positions, about Patton's location specifically. Not because it mattered anymore, the war was lost, but because even at the end, Hitler needed to know where Patton was. As if the American general had become a force of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable, simply a condition to be aware of, like weather or terrain. April 30, 1945. Hitler died in his bunker. Patton was in Czechoslovakia, still advancing, still attacking, still being the general Hitler could never stop. Hitler built the most powerful military machine in modern history. He conquered most of Europe, defeated armies that outnumbered him, and made Blitzkrieg a word everyone knew. And in his final days, he admitted that one American general had turned that entire philosophy against Germany. Not through better resources, not through superior numbers, but through pure, relentless aggression. Patton proved something Hitler had always believed but never wanted to experience from the other side. In modern warfare, speed beats strength, chaos beats planning. Relentless forward movement beats perfect defensive positions. Hitler's final assessment of Patton wasn't propaganda. It was professional recognition. The way a boxer acknowledges another boxer's power after the fight is over. Patton wasn't the Allied general who destroyed the most German divisions. That was probably Zhukov. He wasn't the one who planned the best operations. That was probably Montgomery or Eisenhower. But Patton was the one who got into Hitler's head. The one the Führer asked about at every briefing, tried to deceive at Normandy, tried to avoid in the Ardennes. The one Hitler ultimately couldn't predict, couldn't contain, couldn't stop. And in the end, that mattered more than any individual battle. Because warfare isn't just about destroying enemy armies. It's about destroying enemy confidence, enemy cohesion, enemy ability to plan and respond. Patton did that to Hitler's Wehrmacht better than almost anyone, not by being the best general, but by being the one general Hitler could never figure out. History's greatest commanders aren't always the ones with the perfect plans. Sometimes they're the ones who make their enemies stop planning altogether.